Welcome to Dig Deep, the mining podcast. In this podcast, we go deep into mining news, hot topics, and live interviews with mining professionals and leading figures in the mining industry. Introducing your host, Rob Tyson, founder and director of Mining International and Mining International Executive, a leading global mining recruitment and headhunting agency.
Hi, mining community. Welcome back to another episode of the Dig Deep, the mining podcast. And today's guest is Peter Arkell, who's the MD of Carrington, who are a consulting company that assists international companies doing business in China and Chinese companies that are going abroad. Peter's a prominent member of the mining sector in China, being the chairman of the Global Mining Association of China, which is GMAC. The international mining community's peak representative body and founding chairman of the Oriental Mining Club. Peter's also the member of the Melbourne Mining Club International Advisory Board. So today he's going to come on to the podcast and we're going to discuss the Chinese mining industry, probably talk a little bit about their economy and a lot more around China. Obviously we probably only see a certain narrative that the media put out there, but obviously Peter's on the ground in China, so maybe able to give us a slightly different perspective. Peter's also going to be attending Europe's largest mining event, Resourcing Tomorrow, which is formerly known as the Mines and Money in London, which is taking place in London on the 28th to 30th of November, so in under 2 months' time. So it's a great platform for the entire mining value chain, where you can foster learning, listen to lively debates, and provide valuable network opportunities. So I encourage you to look in the show notes where there is a link to go and get your ticket, and you can also receive a discount, early bird discount, if you use the code DIGDEEP10, which is all in the show notes accompanying this podcast, or if you're looking on the YouTube channel, it's below. So I encourage you to go and get your tickets. And obviously one of the speakers is Peter. So that's welcome Peter to the podcast. How you doing, Peter?
Really good, Rob. Thank you.
No, thank you for your time as well, and taking the time to have a chat with us. As obviously mentioned in the introduction, you live in China. So I just wondering you just tell us a little bit about your career. So the audience that listens to this podcast knows a little bit about you and your background.
No worries. Well, they're guests as well as the audience, aren't they, Rob? We're sharing out with them, so it's lovely to be talking to them as well as to you. Yeah, I came to China about 20 years ago to live. I've been living here for 20 years. I came to China before that, maybe, it's getting close to 30 years ago when I first came here. But I've been living here since early 2004, so almost 20 years. And it's been through a lot of changes since then. I've got my company is a headhunting company like yours that concentrates on the mining industry. And it's quite rare. There are no other companies quite like ours with that mining sweet spot operating in China. So we've got a nice niche within the China mining community. And I came here because I actually met a exceptional candidate at one stage in the early 2000s. Who is a Chinese-born person. I was living and working in Sydney at the time, and he wanted to find a job back in China. He was Chinese-born but Australian citizen, and had an exceptional background. And I got in touch with one of my clients in New York, in fact, and this guy had a background that I thought would be just perfect for them. And just on spec, I gave them a call. So, I've got a guy that looks like this. I don't know what your plans are for China. Would you be interested? And as it turned out, they had a a plan, a $6 billion plan to develop in China, and they had earmarked the need for a country head, and sort of put that to one side, not knowing how they would tackle that. And they asked me if I could get him up to Tokyo to meet with their president for Asia that weekend, which he did, and the rest was history for him and for me. With them having $6 billion to spend in this market, they needed a lot of help to get established. And so I placed him in 2000, and then I was flying in and out of China during that time, and then eventually the call came, said the dam wall's about to break, can you get up here? So that's what brought me here, and it was just a lucky break for me. It was one of those things in your life where a sliding door opened, and it changed my life. Coming to China at that time was one of the best things that happened to me, to be here during that remarkable period where China emerged in the world as a very serious participant in lots of different aspects, but especially in the resources sector. It was such a moment to arrive, and then to ride that wave throughout has been the privilege that I'm thankful for every day. It continues to be remarkable.
Before we start speaking about the Chinese mining industry, obviously you mentioned you've been there for 20 years now. What's it like to live in China? And as you mentioned, there's been a lot of change over that period of time. But obviously you had this opportunity, which you just described, and you moved to China. What's it like living there, and how has it changed since when you first moved there to what it is today?
Yeah. Well, from a personal point of view, it's quite incredible, really. I live in a city which has as many people living in it as my home country of Australia has. 26 million people in both locations. In this case, that spread right across that continent of Australia is now in this corner of China. And I like to think, well, I don't like to think, but I do often ponder that 26 million people is a lot of people in a city, but if for some reason Shanghai fell off the edge of China and disappeared, those 26 million people didn't exist anymore. There'd still be 1.4 billion people living in China. It's the size of the place that staggers you. And also the diversity of the place. China isn't this amorphous blob. It is a remarkably diverse country with so many differences, from north to south, east to west, so much difference. And, the difference that shows itself in the food, in the people, in the activities, the economic conditions. Everything has got so much. The tapestry of the place is just remarkable. And then, post-COVID or during COVID, it became apparent to me Shanghai is a remarkable city itself, in that, unlike, say, Singapore, where Singapore's a crossroad in Asia, people step off from Singapore to all points of Asia. Shanghai is very much a destination city. It's a place where people come to do something, do business, for meetings or whatever. And then during COVID, we didn't have any visitors. It ceased. That 3 years we didn't have any activity in terms of people coming in, and we were like an enclave of 26 million people that didn't have the visitors that we'd been used to for all that time, history before. And it was really, really strange. That was a period that I found really nutty. But now, since COVID, and we're still really emerging from that period. It's almost a year, not quite a year yet since it reopened. Still got another couple of months. So it's 10 months since we've been open, and it's only now starting to hit its straps, now getting stride. But as a place to live, I find it remarkable. I love living here, and it's a good place to do business. I think that the Chinese are very entrepreneurial. They love business, and it's a place which is really unlike Australia, which I think Australia doesn't have a great outward-looking perspective. China is a domestic demand-driven economy in many respects, but it also reaches out to the world. It's the biggest trading partner of just about every nation in the world, and as a result, you really have a connection with so much parts of the world. And we have international community here as well as the Chinese community. Very, very all nations, are represented by chambers of commerce and other interest groups here. So it's a fascinating place to live and work.
Yeah. Obviously, what I want to speak about now is obviously the Chinese mining industry, and I suppose most of us probably think when we talk about the Chinese mining industry that a lot of companies, Chinese companies, are investing in assets overseas. But I suppose what I wanted to ask you is, I wonder if you can just give us an overview of the mining sector within China.
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's something that people may not be fully aware of is that China does have a very active domestic mining industry. It's one of the largest gold producing nations in the world. It has surprisingly, maybe for my Australian country people, it's a very large iron ore producer. Of the 1.3 billion tonne of iron ore that are consumed by China's steel mills, maybe 200 to 300 million tonne of that is produced in Chinese iron ore mines. It has copper. It has obviously rare earths. Lithium has been a significant mineral that's been mined here for a long time. It has copper, zinc. Even at one stage, I had a client that was a Canadian company that was doing diamond mining in China. So domestically, it has its own well advanced. So of course, coal. It is massive in coal. So it has its own domestic capability. And then, if I wind the clock back a little bit, Rob, when I first came here, it was enormously prospective from an exploration point of view. You mentioned that I'm the chairman of GMAC. Our association, 15, 20 years ago, had many, many mining companies that were members of our association, and they were actively engaged in exploration in China. We had more than 400 projects operating by foreign companies. So all of the majors and many juniors, some listed on AIM, that were listed expressly for a project that they were developing in China. But unfortunately, now, to the best of my knowledge, we now only have one international foreign mining company that's actually producing here in China. So all of that exploration effort didn't turn into mining projects, regrettably. One by one, while they found assets, they for one reason or another, and we can discuss that, they withdrew, and we now only have the one. It's a really interesting company called Griffin. It's a AIM-listed zinc miner that has a fabulous, first-class, world-class operation not far from Beijing, where they're mining zinc.
Obviously, you mentioned that you're the chairman of GMAC. which is the Global Mining Association of China. I wonder if you can just tell us a little bit more about what GMAC is, and where does it fit in with the sort of broader industry within the country?
Well, I guess the name sort of says it all. It is an association for the international mining community that's here in China, and we were once made up a lot of mining companies, but now less. Well, we have the significant mining companies that are here and who are doing marketing here rather than, or they've got sourcing offices and so on. They're not actually doing physical mining activity. But we, in addition to those mining companies, we have a very broad mining community, be they consultants or bankers or lawyers, people involved in M&A, or there are equipment manufacturers and, likes of, Sandvik and those sort of companies. So it's a very broad-based mining community now. We meet each month, usually in Beijing, and it's a way of getting the community together. We're a pretty small community in a very, very big country, and we bring together our community once a month. We have a guest speaker who provides us with primary data, be it AI applications in mining, or it may be about pricing trends in a particular commodity, or it may be legal issues, or it may be we have the ambassadors of many of the different mining jurisdictions around the world talking to us about their mining activity and the prospectiveness of those places for Chinese and international miners to come. So that's our core activity once a month. But on top of that, we're also involved in providing training. We do JORC code training in Chinese for Chinese companies that are interested in investing internationally. We represent the international mining community to the Chinese government. We have very strong relationships with the China Mining Association, which is part of the Natural Resources Department. We engage in dialogue with different countries, the different embassies and so on, to help them with understanding what the landscape looks like here in China. And we from time to time we prepare white papers on the activity that's happening in China and present that to government. So it fulfills a number of different purposes, but I think the most beneficial thing is that we bring together the community, so we actually learn from each other. That primary data is really important, and people sharing and collaborating is our main strength, I think.
Why do you think there's an underlying of China's role within the global mining sector?
What do I think it is?
Yeah.
Well, it's a very big question. I think that the place that China plays, China emerged in the industry, in the global industry, at the time which became known as the mining boom, going back to early 2000s, when China decided that it couldn't provide for itself from its own domestic mining, that it needed to get resources from abroad. And that surge of demand that came from China created what became known as the mining boom. And I don't think it was really a mining boom in as much as production that was coming out of the rest of the world couldn't meet that demand, and that caused the great increase in pricing. But China also felt like a victim in that rapid increase in pricing. I remember looking at what the price of iron ore, we had a visit from an Australian Prime Minister, and I looked up what the price of iron ore was when he first came to China in 2001. And at that time, the price of a tonne of iron ore was $18, 1.8 per tonne. I looked up what the price is today, and coincidentally, it was $118. So exactly $100 more today than what it was in 2001. So China has had a profound influence or impact on the global mining sector from that point of view, and that is demand. And then from demand, China then decided that it felt as if it was being maybe taken advantage of. Chinese steel mills thought, shivers, it used to be $18 a tonne when the Japanese were buying a lot of iron ore, and now it's went from 18 to 45, 45 to 75, 75 to 100, 150, and so it went. What's going on here? This doesn't seem fair. So they realised that instead of being a price taker, they needed to become a price maker and to get themselves involved in global mining, be it through investment, sending its own mining companies abroad, joint ventures, and so on. So it's become I think it's become an integral part of the global mining scene, and it will continue to be because of the enormous demand that comes from China.
What do you see as some of the major challenges of the mining industry within China? Obviously, you've mentioned about the various commodities that you've got within the country. I understand, obviously, gold is a big China make obviously a lot of gold, but I think they also import a lot of gold as well. What do you see as some of the major challenges that face the Chinese mining industry?
Well, you're right. The domestic industry is significant, and I have listened to your earlier podcast that you did with Jake Klein, the CEO of Evolution, and former Jake's earlier claim to fame was the establishment of Sino Gold, which was an enormously successful operation here in China with 4 operating mines in China, producing a lot of gold at very good price, and then sold that at a premium to a Canadian miner, Eldorado, who then in turn sold their operations to Chinese miners. So it domestically, and then of course lithium in Sichuan province, we have very significant lithium deposits in Sichuan province, and so lithium has been something which has been mined, and the processing of lithium domestically in China is well advanced. They have the IP to be able to do that very effectively, and have more than 100 lithium processing plants in China, compared to, say, in Europe, there wouldn't be 20 processing plants in Europe, and in North America probably something similar. In Australia, only 1 or 2. So the bulk of lithium processing is done in China because they've been doing it for so long. Rare earths the same. China is a dominant player in rare earths, and there's a lot of strategic national strategic concerns about China's dominance in rare earth production, but they've been doing it. They've invested in it for so long. For decades they've been developing this, and it's now that rare earths are becoming more important for the energy revolution that we're witnessing. It's China has got such a head start. They've invested the dollars, they've got invested in IP, and they've also invested, regrettably, in environmental impacts. The processing it's the sort of thing that not in my backyard people get concerned about. And so, but China has invested in that, and so that's why it has such a significantly strong position. And then, of course, there's coal. Coal. Australia exports about 300 or 400 million tonne of coal to China, but China itself produces something like 4 billion tonne of coal a year domestically. I've been to some coal mines here in China, which are so massive. They're 100 million tonne each in production, and that's enough to supply the United Kingdom with coal for 2 or 3 years. It's mind-boggling the size of some of these things. I've been to 2 underground coal mines in Shaanxi province where they are very close to being autonomous underground mines. Most of the people that work in the coal mines there wear a suit and a white shirt to work, rather than a coal miner's hat and come out with a black face. It's revolutionary what's being done in the domestic scene. But at the same time, there's a drive to do better. A good friend of mine, Peng Jimin, who is the president of the Chinese Mining Association, he wants to see Chinese mines going deeper, going greener, being more safe, and being more productive. And he can't see them doing that unless they have more cooperation with international mining companies. And he sees the future being more collaboration between Chinese miners and international miners, bringing the strengths of both sides of the industry together to do even better. And I think we'll see that. Maybe we'll get to talk about some of the things in the future, but I think we're seeing that already. There's evidence of that starting to shape up.
Yeah, well, we can speak about now. Obviously, we've been speaking about more of a Chinese domestic market in mining. What do you think of China's role in obviously in the international scene, and where you've seen examples of positive cooperation between Chinese and Western mining companies?
Yeah. So internationally, I think we're going to continue to see China getting involved in international projects, and it's been interesting to watch the evolution of this. In the early days, they looked at jurisdictions like Australia and Canada as very attractive destinations for investment and for engagement. And we saw, companies like Minmetals, MMG, getting formed by the acquisition of most of the Oz Minerals assets in Australia, or the company in Australia with its assets internationally. But they acquired those assets and created a company which is headquartered in Melbourne. And from that company, they then have grown that business globally with the acquisition, say, of Las Bambas in Peru. And when they bought those assets from Oz Minerals, I remember at the time the chairman of the Minmetals group that bought it said, said, why are you paying so much money? Because the Australian government had insisted that Prominent Hill be taken out because it was on Australian defence land. And he said it's because we're actually wanting to buy not necessarily the assets, but the platform. They wanted to have a company which was outward looking, which was international, had international people working in it, so that they could then become a better international player globally. And I think that's been a terrific success story. The MMG, they've had their challenges in Las Bambas for sure, but not because they're Chinese and not because they were headquartered in Melbourne or anywhere else. These things are always challenging, and they've now got assets in the DRC, in Africa, and so on. So that's one great example. An example I like, and I think is going to be not a template, but certainly a great demonstration of collaboration, is the way that Simandou will eventually be developed, with Rio Tinto and Chinalco partnering and in one part, and then Baoa Steel and the winning consortium developing the rest of it, and then both those consortiums working together to develop infrastructure and bringing the best of Rio Tinto technology for developing an asset together with the grunt and the infrastructure capability of the Chinese. I think it's a really fine example of how things can be done. And then there are examples in Indonesia with nickel. The Chinese are really, when Indonesia decided that it would not export raw nickel, that there had to be value add, the Chinese have embraced that wholeheartedly, and we have industrial parks established in Indonesia with Chinese companies investing large amounts of money, which has attracted other investors to come into Indonesia, and it's also attracted Indonesian companies into these industrial parks, and they're something to be seen. These are massive facilities that have been built, which are being very productive, and they're very, very positive outcome for the Indonesian economy as well. So I think there's a number of really good examples around. But then I also mentioned about stuff happening in China with Griffin Mining. Griffin Mining had done a great job with their zinc asset, and they've been given encouragement to develop that even more at that site and to look at other deposits around China. So I think it would be great. My friend, as I mentioned, Peng Chimin, he would love to see more collaboration in China as well as stuff abroad. If I could just say one more thing, sorry to keep on going around, Rob, but another terrific thing that I'm aware of that's happening is Zijin, who is one of the biggest gold producers in the world, but also now involved in copper and has a great partnership with Ivanhoe in Africa. Zijin, the chairman of Zijin, is wanting to see his company become more internationally minded, have a better mindset, which is international, not just Chinese. And so the chairman is seeking to put strategically inside his company in headquarters in Xiamen in Fujian province to bring foreigners into that company and sit them in amongst the other workers, the other executives in the company in China, so that when discussions are happening, strategic discussions about the development of a project, how the company operates in general, there are going to be voices there which aren't just Chinese voices, but they are putting in international people, expertise and executive knowledge and so on into their company here. So that's forward thinking. I don't know many international companies that think China's such an important place for us. We better get some more Chinese people let's get some senior Chinese people into our company. I'm looking forward to the day when we see a Chinese person as the CEO of one of the majors in the world. China has donated so much money to the international mining majors. I'd love to see more Chinese executives at the top of those companies.
You touched earlier about the impact of geopolitical tensions and the impact that it had or it has on our industry. I'm wondering what kind of role business can play in the balancing some of those tensions.
This is a pet topic of mine, Rob. Sitting here in China, and reading international media about China, the bogeyman in world geopolitics. Sometimes I read these newspaper reports and look out the window and wonder what the country is that they're talking about in their reports. There must be another place called China than the one that I live in. So it is quite depressing at times to read that. The international mining community, there are surveys that are done here regularly about business sentiment. And surprisingly for your listeners, whether it be the Australian Chamber of Commerce, the American Chamber of Commerce, the British Chamber of Commerce, the European Chamber of Commerce, almost universally, year after year after year, the business sentiment is positive or very positive for 70% or thereabouts in each of those communities. So business sees that doing business here in China is something which is they see a bright light ahead for the next 12 months and have for year on year on year. So it's really puzzling that we get a lot of this political tension, and it comes from another place. The dare I say the military-industrial complex and the politicians, the national security lobby has its own views about where China fits into the world, and it's not as bright a picture as what I've just been painting for the way business sees it here. So I think there is a place for business to be that. The national security lobby is a very loud lobby. It has, you mentioned safety and so on. It gets people's attention really quickly, and there is a legitimate place for that in the discourse. But in my opinion, it's too loud, and public sentiment goes to where the most noise is. And so business needs to also bring something to the table. There is a place for politicians and for media to listen to what business is experiencing here on the ground in China, especially mining. Mining has been such a great beneficiary of Chinese demand. And the majors that are here, be it selling iron ore or copper and coal into China, are great corporate citizens in China. They know how to operate in this market. They're very respectful. They make a great contribution to the economy here, and they are on the ground. There is a place for listening to people on the ground rather than who are looking from afar. And if you're looking at something through binoculars from a long, long way away, sometimes it can look like something else rather than what it really is when you're up close. And I'd love to see a lot more attention, politicians to ask folks who are on the ground here, what do you see? How do you see the world from China? And how do you think China? Ask the question, what does China think? We look always, at things with a view about how it affects us rather than how do we affect them? And I think there's the voice of business is something which is based on real experience, and it's on the ground. And I think it would add a lot of value to the discourse if it was engaged more.
Yeah, it probably goes on to my next question about the actual Chinese economy. Now, maybe some things that I've read where it looks like you're going into recession, or if you look at the housing market where you've built these big cities and no one's living in these big ghost towns and both skyscrapers everywhere, and there's no one living there. Is that reality? And how do you see the Chinese economy at the moment?
Yeah. The ghost cities is a beauty, isn't it? That's something that people will often point to, and for a lot of your listeners, if they're interested in the Chinese economy, I recommend an economist called Andy Rothman, who works for an American outfit called Matthews Asia. Andy is a terrific economist, great observer of China. He's an former American State Department, and Andy used to make the story. He used to have the anecdote that he used to like going to. For his Christmas holidays, he used to like going to a ghost city and then to return to it in 12 months' time and see what was actually happening 12 months later, because it would be bustling and there'd be a lot of hive of activity. So, ghost cities is a neat way of people pointing to something that really doesn't exist, I don't think. But to your point about the Chinese economy today, certainly the property market is having its moment because of some of the issues with some of the bigger property developers. So there is some stress in that sector of the economy, and that will have an impact on the demand for steel and copper and so on, obviously. But I think that is working its way through. I think more concerning at the moment is consumer demand in China at the moment. The coming out of COVID, Chinese consumers didn't get any financial support during and post COVID. So consumers have locked their savings away and concerned that things are going to be okay for them going forward. So there's still some consumer demand, consumer sentiment needs to be to return. We're only 10 months out of opening up here in China since COVID, and it was a very, very severe lockdown that we went through. And I think there are signs. We had what they call the Golden Week just finished during the beginning of October, and there was a lot of domestic travel that took place. People are now getting out and about. So I think the signs are there, but we won't see consumer demand return or consumer confidence return, I don't think, until the end of the year. It's been a slow bounce back, maybe not a bounce, but a slow return. But we're a long way from recession. The forecast is to get a 5% growth this year, and 5% is a heck of a lot when you look at the size of if you add 5% to the world's second largest economy, that's still a big number. That's going to be adding something like a South Korea to the global economy next year if we hit 5%. So it's not nothing. It's actually quite significant. So I think the Chinese economy will continue to grow at a slower rate. To do it at 10% now, 10%, 10, 15 years ago was a very significant amount, but 5% of what the economy is today is probably even still bigger than that in terms of dollars. And the economy will continue to evolve. It's been a remarkable story so far, and I can't see it not continuing to be. The government has already started. It isn't doing one big dump of dollars or renminbi into the economy now. I think I heard an economist the other day saying that there have been about 100 different measures that have been introduced since the reopening from COVID that have been strategically placed into the economy, and we're watching to see. These aren't big bang switches that have been pulled. They're quite strategic, and we'll see the effect of those as the economy starts to gather some momentum. I'm an optimist, and I continue to see that there's a lot still to be optimistic about in the economy at the moment.
You're going to be, as I mentioned, you're going to be speaking at the Resourcing Tomorrow conference. in London, which is at the end of November. What's the message that you want to bring to the conference, and what content are you going to be covering and speaking about?
Yeah, a lot of what we've been talking about today, I suspect, Rob. I'm really impressed with the organisers, in as much as I gave feedback at an earlier conference that I went to, and I was concerned that China was sort of it seemed like an afterthought in the agenda. It was in a small room off the main hall in a late in the day session, more suited to a coffee meeting place than for serious discussion. And then when I listened to different speakers and delegates, they would often talk about China as an afterthought. And I, being such a passionate China advocate, I wanted to see recognition that Chinese demand has made the mining industry what it is today. Without Chinese mining, Chinese demand for resources, we may not be having the great successes that we've had over the last couple of decades. So my gratitude goes to the organisers of Resourcing Tomorrow to recognise that, and to put it into a prominent part of put the China discussion into a prominent part of the program. We have on our panel, we have a number of outstanding panelists who we've got a couple of Chinese senior executives, chairman of a significant company, and the CEO of a state-owned company. We have myself, and we have an economist who is very knowledgeable when it comes to the Chinese economy. And I want the discussion to do a number of things. One, to show the delegates that the executives that work in these Chinese companies are really international, and they really get the global mining scene, and they've got a contribution to make, and they are to be treated as value adds. You can engage with them, and you'll do good business by working with these people. That's one. Two, I want to get recognition for the place that China plays in the global mining scene. China will continue to be a customer, and Chinese demand will continue to be important for the industry. But China is also an investor. It's also a miner itself, an international miner, and it's also something which is bringing innovation to the industry. I mentioned that coal mine, which is almost autonomous, and bringing that level of sophistication using AI to our industry. I think we're going to see a lot of greatness to come for our continued productivity coming to our industry by having collaboration. So there's some of the messages I would like to get in the dialogue that we have at Resourcing Tomorrow.
And lastly, just wondered if there was anything else that you would like to add as some of your closing thoughts. Obviously, our audience is generally from the mining industry, in various levels and various disciplines. Also, obviously, suppliers to the industry, and obviously also investors as well. So just wonder if you had any closing thoughts.
Yeah. Well, one closing thought is I just looked at my face on this video. It's getting late in the evening here, and the light that I've got shining on my scone is bright, but my face is dark. So I apologise if anyone is watching us on your YouTube channel, Rob. Or maybe shouldn't apologise. Maybe they should be thankful that they can't see me. I've got a very good face for podcasting. So thanks for giving me First of all, thanks for giving me the opportunity to have a chat with you, Rob. I think you and I work in a similar industry, and the mining industry is a mighty community to work in. It doesn't matter where you go in the world. You meet mining people and you instantly have a lot to talk about. And I'm really grateful for two things in my life. One, lots of things in my life I'm grateful for, but two of the things I am grateful for is coming to China and doing it with the mining industry. My friends at the Melbourne Mining Club, when we come to London, it's just one of the best evenings in the world that you can have. You get a room full of miners that converge on London, and you put them in the one room together. You don't need to do any. You wouldn't need to have a guest speaker. You just put people in a room, and you can't shut them up. They'll, like I am today, just keep on talking. So it's the mining industry is a great place to be. It's a great place to work. You and I help to find talent to work in the mining industry, and it's always a privilege. One thing I think I would really, if I could just leave this thought for the mining industry, I think I think in this world of climate change and the concerns about it, and the mining industry is often seen as the culprit, where the problem. But I actually think that mining is the solution. I took home to my granddaughter after a mining conference in Australia, the GMAC conference. I took home a pencil that Rio Tinto was giving away, and a notepad. This is quite an interesting pencil. It's more than just a pencil like that. It was a pretty clunky sort of a thing, and I gave it to my how old was she? My 11-year-old granddaughter, and she said, my name is Ye. Ye is Chinese for grandfather. And she said, oh, Ye, thank you, but I don't want it. I said, oh, why not, Daisy? She said, because I don't like miners. And if a 10 or 11-year-old doesn't like miners because of the climate, I think we've got a problem. We need to be able to show that the mining industry is a big part of the solution. Daisy and I talked about, her telephone and all the mining activity in there. If there's nothing, Robert Friedland often says, I've heard him say that you either dig it out of the ground or you grow it out of the ground. There's only one place it can come from. And we've got to do better at explaining to the world, especially to the young people, that mining is a great industry and it provides us with the standard of living that we enjoy. But it's the solution to the climate problem. It's not the problem itself. And that'll be a message I'll try. Maybe I'll try and get that into our discussion when we meet in London.
Yeah, certainly. Peter, really appreciate your time. Thank you for sharing your story, your thoughts, and your knowledge around obviously China and the Chinese mining industry. And as I probably mentioned in the introduction, I suppose people in the Western world or people outside of China hear certain things, and maybe we hear different things, and maybe it might be a certain narrative. So appreciate you giving us information and knowledge on the ground, obviously working and living in China. So really appreciate your time. If any of our audience wants to reach out to you, if they've got any questions, they may be looking to do business in China, they might have a Chinese partner. How can my audience reach out to you? How can they follow your message or even get in contact with you? And are you across sort of any social media platform channels?
The only social media that I'm involved with, Rob, is LinkedIn. People can find me there. Peter Arkell is my name, Arkell, and they'll find me there, and they can send me a message on that. People can also find me at my company, which is Carrington Day, all one word.com, and they'll see me at resourcing tomorrow, and at a mining conference near you, if they want to catch up. I'm always up for a chat. And if anyone wants to have an argument with me about the place of China in the world, I'm up for an argument as well. I love that. Talking about this stuff is what I really enjoy.
Yeah, no, great. And we'll include those in the show notes accompanying this, whether you listen to the podcast or whether you're looking at watching this on the YouTube channel. All those details will be below, so you can get in contact with Peter if you have any questions. And as he mentioned, he's going to be at Resourcing tomorrow, which is at the end of November. So included in the show notes is a link to get a ticket and also get a discount on that ticket if you put Dig Deep 10. To get some a reduction on the ticket price. So I encourage you to go now and grab yourself a ticket. It's going to be a great event. Many companies there, many like-minded people from our mining industry, where you're obviously going to network well, whether you're looking for a job, whether you're looking for a joint venture business, or anything in between. Obviously, it's an event that you should be attending. So again, Peter, really appreciate your time. Thank you for coming on to the podcast. And those that are listening, really appreciate your continued support. Thank you for sharing these episodes and continue to share these episodes among people within our industry, but also people outside of our industry as well. As Peter alluded to, we need to educate the people outside of our industry and people around the world as to what mining is all about, and it's essential for mankind and for us to develop across the world. And anything that we use, touch, all comes from the mine. So please keep sharing these episodes. And until next time, happy mining.
Thank you for listening. Remember to reach out to Rob via the show notes and be sure to subscribe and leave a review. Until next time, happy mining, helping each other to improve the mining industry.